beneath our thinking minds, we are all one. We are a product of the same essence, and we'll return back to it when we're gone. When we meet someone else from that place, we're honouring the fullness of who they are, not just who they're showing up as in that moment. This week I've been reflecting on my own relationship to connection, specifically when it comes to emerging technologies, or what most people seem to be referring to as AI, as well as the struggles that many young people are facing, and perhaps not just young people, but all people these days with the way that technology is impacting our lives. And it's given me much cause to bring into perspective perhaps a new way of seeing the importance of human connection, which really is the purpose behind making these videos. It's the way of me being able to transfer to you the recognition I have for your journey through life, the things that you may struggle with, or that you're quietly wishing someone would acknowledge or celebrate with you. You don't necessarily have people around you to do so. And I've been very fortunate to be a part of a few coaching circles and communities of similar kinds, and which have been tremendously valuable. But every now and again I forget that, and I kind of walk away from them. And I find myself remembering the value of being surrounded by people who acknowledge that you are not fixed, as in your perspective can change, your outlook can change, your worldview can change, and perhaps even to welcome and encourage it when it does. And there's three examples which I want to draw on. And the first is community in general. Community is whoever we are in proximity with, whether that's physically or virtually. Of course, there's no substitute for being physically in community with people, but that can be difficult depending on where you find yourself in the world. Proximity really is just the wider conversation that you are a part of. Are you surrounded by people who are reinforcing the very things you're trying to move away from? And that includes the books you read, the social media sites you visit, the music you listen to, the news that you may watch, people that you talk to at work. And I know that sometimes you can't get away from those things, but recognize that the voice carries far more deeply than we perhaps give it credit for. And a dominant voice, a dominant narrative expressed by many, creates a pattern inside of us that we, without realizing it, can gravitate towards because it's familiar. Just like walking on a familiar path, really. I would say we really want to surround ourselves as best as we can, or be in proximity with the conversation we want to be having, whether that's one of possibility, positivity, wealth, whether it's related to a particular area of interest we have in our lives, or some other endeavour that we wish to embark upon. And it's not because we are always trying to find the best way or the right way, or to copy what someone else is doing. It's just simply to be in the spirit of that conversation. When I think about learning institutions, I love being in places like libraries and bookshops, because people tend to be in those places to learn. And so you're in an atmosphere that has been created for learning. the spirit and the community of learning is there. And to acknowledge the value of that. And acknowledge that human connection arises when we are seen and when we see others. Not when we say something and someone says, yeah, I feel that too. Or, yeah, I've been there. When we say something and someone says, I hear you. Just want to acknowledge that. We so seldom hear that, but it's so important. Which leads me to the next thing. And that's the subject of AI. Or more specifically, the ChatGPT style engagements that many of us are now leveraging as ways to feel some semblance of connection or understanding. And truthfully speaking, they're not really AI. They're language learning models, LLMs, which are structured in their design and they recognize patterns. And I've spent a large amount of time over the last couple of years interacting with these applications, and I've come to realize that whilst they're incredibly useful for information, they are terrible at connection because they can only mirror back your request. When you're speaking to a human, often it can be the case that, especially someone who's truly listening to you, it can sometimes be the case that that person can reflect something in what they're hearing of what you're speaking beyond the words. It may be the sentiment, it may be the tone, it may be a pause or an emotion or an expression on your face. And technology, currently at least, doesn't have the capacity to do that. But also remember that connection is organic. It's something that we feel. And machines are not feeling organic beings. They are created by humans to replicate things which are considered to be valuable, but their essence is always going to be man-made. Just like the essence of something which has been modified in a lab, it may look and smell and taste the same, but its essence is very, very different to something which has grown organically and evolved in such a way that its taste and its depth and its color can be truly appreciated. It doesn't necessarily diminish its value. We just have to remember its value is relative. For those of you who are Amazon subscribers, or at least are familiar with Amazon programming, there's a series called Clarkson's Farm, which I've been thoroughly enjoying over the last few months. And I've grown up with Top Gear in my household, and Jeremy Clarkson has been a part of my own motoring journey, I suppose, for as long as I can remember. And so to see him in this different context, which also happens to reflect the natural world I know and love, hence the videos, it's incredibly interesting and as well as entertaining. And I've learned so much about the natural world and the struggles that people face, and especially the younger farmers and the farming generations who are continuously oppressed by government legislation and the isolation of working for long hours on one's own. And I think in times like that, it becomes even more important to look for human connection, to seek it in ways which may not be currently available. And when we come into contact with people like that, we don't necessarily know what kind of hardships they're facing. And it can sometimes be the case that there isn't anything we can do physically to relieve the burden of what's actually happening. But just to acknowledge the presence of another human being, whether there is anything shared that's deep or that may be hard to hear or hard for another person to express, whether it's joyful, it's a celebration, but just to acknowledge that there is another living, breathing human being in front of you, and that perhaps the desperation that you have to return back to your comfortable life or to your phone or to get back to the thing that you were doing before that person appeared isn't quite as important as it seems to be. And that maybe you may find yourself in that position, or perhaps you have found yourself in that position. And that over time, you may have lost sight of that and forgotten that it can happen to all of us. I'm a huge fan of classical Indian music. It just fascinates me, and I was watching a concert, which is sort of half workshop, half concert, a couple of days ago, and I had the translations on, and one of the translations of one of the songs that this lady was performing, something along the lines of, I'm going to paraphrase it here because I can't remember it exactly, was, in happiness everybody is your friend, in sadness everybody seems to be your enemy. It really struck me. I just thought, wow, doesn't it feel that way sometimes? When you're in a high state and you feel good, joyous, and everything's going the way that it seems to be working out for you, you can make friends with anybody. And when you're in those low states and you feel disconnected, it doesn't matter how hard you try, it feels like everyone's just looking at you as if there's something wrong with you. And I love the universality of some of the words which are used in these devotional songs, not to describe the experience of life as it occurs just to one of us, but accounts of people who over thousands of years have noticed the similarities. And that's what spiritual work is. It's noticing the similarities, putting our differences aside and connecting from that place within us, which essentially is the same. Beneath our thinking minds, we are all one. We are a product of the same essence, and we'll return back to it when we're gone. When we meet someone else from that place, we're honouring the fullness of who they are, not just who they're showing up as in that moment, but we're also meeting them as they could be, which for many of us is so much more. Not because we aren't enough in this moment, but because so many of us have potential which we fear to tap into, because the world is constantly trying to remind us of the consequences of doing so, which seem to be negative, but never really are. And that's the meaning of namaste. When we greet someone We place our palms together and we see the fullness of their being, their spirit, the love and infinite potential expressed in individual form. And certainly in the Western world, greeting people with your palms together can be perceived as slightly strange. So we may hesitate to do that in every circumstance, but we can adopt the internal posture of Namaste when we greet people. And it doesn't have to be something that we say. It doesn't have to be something that we do. It's where we're meeting them from. You know, when I'm talking to you, I'm not talking to you as a limited human form that has problems and troubles and successes and failures. I'm recognizing that within you, but also that there is a limitless potential behind that, which is far greater than the mind is capable of conceiving or imagining. And because it's not capable of conceiving or imagining it, it dismisses it as unimportant. And when we start to orient awareness back to its origin, that's when real connection takes place, and that's the connection that we all have the ability to return back to. And just acknowledging that's a possibility gives so many of us relief. I don't like to use that word, but I do think it's appropriate. Relief from the immediacy of our situations. And I feel incredibly blessed to be able to return to that place over and over and over again through my words, through my presence, through these videos, I hope. And to share that with you, whether you're watching this just after I've released it, or whether you're watching this at some future point down the line when everything has become so artificial that you're looking for something real in the world. Maybe you stumble across this. Either way, may it be a reminder of what's essential to you, of what can never be taken away or touched by hardship or inflated by success. It's just there. That resonates with you at some level, do tell me. Any interaction that you offer on this platform is incredibly valuable because it tells YouTube that other people may find it valuable too. If you think there's someone else out there that would benefit from hearing this, and I would appreciate you letting them know. As always, I thank you for your attention. And I acknowledge you for all that you are and all that you could be. I hope to see you again soon.